phone interview was done in a payphone. It was out by the edge of the road, this tiny little town of Cougar, Washington. But the log trucks were roaring by about every 90 seconds. The log trucks are hauling all the lumber off of Mount St. Helens. And so the phone interview was totally dysfunctional. We're trying to do this interview. The log trucks are roaring by. Was virtually impossible. But it worked well for me. Because at this end, they loved it. Here he's out there planting trees in the volcanic blast zone. And so the fact that the logs roared by was working in my favor.
Hi, my name is Joe Geidel. It is August 25th, 2022. I'm here in Warwick, New York. Would you mind stating your name for the camera?
Yes, my name is Howard Horowitz.
Great.
And at home here at Warwick.
Now, Howie, where are you from originally?
I was born in New York City.
Okay.
And lived there for the first 18 years or so. Went to high school in the city. And went to Rochester for college. And that's where I really began to practice poetry. Was in the 60s in Rochester. And I met my partner Ann there, and we went west. We got married in 1970 and just immediately went out west. We didn't really know anybody out there, but we had an idea of what we were looking for. And at that time was a migration to the nature in the west. And so that's what we did. Sure. And we decided to go to Oregon, and we did. We ended up living in the most beautiful place you could ever dream of in Oregon. It was a shack. So it was a shack in an incredibly beautiful setting. We lived there for a number of years and ended up working in the woods there, planting trees. We worked with a worker-owned co-op called the Hodads, and that was exciting. We did that for almost 10 years. During that time, I also went to school at the University of Oregon, took courses in geography, and was working on poetry all through those years as well. At a certain point, it became the opportunity opened up to become a college teacher. And that happened because planting trees led to fighting against the misuse of herbicides. Because we were working in the woods in places that they sprayed a lot. And we had ill effects health-wise, but also because we worked in the woods, we knew how to measure trees. We began to measure the growth of the trees on these spray sites and came to realize that most of the acreage they were spraying wasn't really in a position to benefit from it. That here and there was a patch that was being choked out. Mostly it really wasn't. And the areas that were being choked out, basically the crop trees that we planted by shrubs and wild plants, those areas could be easily taken care of with workers, with chainsaws and hand tools. So we ended up publicizing that information and reporting on it. And then the EPA ended up deciding to go after the herbicide 2,4,5-T, which was half of Agent Orange from the Vietnam era, and was what we were being sprayed with, because actually they used it here too. And they were going after it for reasons of its apparent effects on health. But the EPA's job is to weigh risk and benefit, quantify risk and benefit. And risk is health, but benefit was the economic benefits. And the lumber industry really dominated that story. So our measurements that showed little benefit were valuable to the EPA. So I ended up working for them for 2 years and ended up writing 300 pages of testimony for them.
See, that's quite a journey to go from living in the city to then going out west and doing everything that you said, going out and doing these investigations and trying to uncover the truth behind these agricultural processes. What do you believe led you to go out of the city and into the country?
I loved nature to begin. Even when I was a kid in the city, I was a butterfly collector, and I wasn't just catching them, I was studying them. And I remember climbing over the fences at the railroad tracks to get to the patch of unmown ground on the other side. There were butterflies there. And we would always be out there catching butterflies. So we and as a child, we went to Vermont sometimes in the summers. So I loved the outdoors. Nature was never, I was always interested in nature. I went to the Museum of Natural History as a kid a lot and loved it. I have a poem about the Museum of Natural History that I might read afterwards.
Sure.
But anyway, and to my wife, we loved nature. When we were in Rochester, we got out as much as we could out into the woods around there, the Finger Lakes. And again, Oregon, it turned out that we were looking for beauty in nature, and we found it. We were very lucky. As it ended up, the land that we lived on, with the help of many other people, we helped make it become a county park, and it is now a county park. However, it burned to the ground during the forest fires of 2 years ago. There were horrible forest fires in Oregon and the Northwest, and was swept down the McKenzie River Valley and burned everything for 30 miles, including that place. But I still love it there and still go back there. And I have some poems about that. I have that it burned to the ground doesn't mean it's ruined forever. Maybe it's not going to be in my lifetime what it used to be, but it's still, it's part of the cycle.
Yeah, it all goes through the cycle. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, how did you discover your love of poetry? So I understand the connection to nature, but how does poetry find its way into the mix?
I studied some poetry at the university and encountered other poets there, and worked with them, and then became interested in some of the other poets of that time, contemporary poets of the late 1960s, and grew to really like their work. Gary Snyder is a famous one who I really liked. Jack Spicer, more obscure, but a really amazing, great poet. I read his stuff. And so I ended up getting involved in writing poetry, and I was always a reviser. I'd write something and then revise it. And I was prone to doing visual things. The first published poem was actually reads down and sideways. It's called Revolution, and it's a circle, and you could read it. And when I have read it, you read it down and across. So that was always there. That was there from 1968. And in the early 70s, we began to work on these poems, some of which were never published, but I think still deserve it, and I still intend to do it even 50 years later.
Fantastic.
And so that basically, the poems have always been there. When I got the teaching job, which was easy to do insofar as it wasn't that hard to take the herbicide testimony and turn it into a doctoral PhD thesis. It was already long enough. It was just a matter of kind of rearranging some legal words and making one academic. It was like these. It's like 6 weeks of revision to do that, and then I was lucky enough to get a job here back in the East Coast. We were ambivalent about leaving because we loved Oregon. But teaching jobs are hard to get. They were in 1982, and so we took it. It's interesting that getting the job was connected to planting trees too. They hired somebody who teaches natural resources. It was environmental studies. They wanted someone to teach forests and water, natural resource courses. And when I submitted the application, which I didn't know about, except my father had sent me a thing from the New York Times in the mail that had the advertisement. So I submitted to it, and they were interested. And so then we arranged to have a big interview. The main thing was a big phone interview. They weren't prepared to have me fly cross country yet. Later they did. But anyway, the phone interview, it happened. And when it happened, I was planting trees at Mount St. Helens, which had erupted about a year before that. There's a lot of tree planting going on because of the last one. And so, this is before cell phones. In 1982, there weren't cell phones at all. And so the phone interview was done in a payphone. It was out by the edge of the road, this tiny little town of Cougar, Washington. But the log trucks were roaring by about every 90 seconds. The log trucks are hauling all the lumber off of Mount St. Helens. And so the phone interview was totally dysfunctional. We're trying to do this interview. The log trucks are roaring by. Was virtually impossible. But it worked well for me. Because at this end, they loved it. Here he's out there planting trees in the volcanic blast zone. And so the fact that the logs roared by worked in my favor. It worked out. Wow. So we got the job, and then we moved back east. That was 82, and so we've been here 40 years.
Hey, and you couldn't have picked a better place. This is beautiful right here.
Oh, yeah. It is. And Ann's made it beautiful with the gardening and stuff like the milkweeds, up there, a patch of milkweed for the butterflies. And there's all kinds of, there's a pond, which is pretty much dry right now, but there's a pond down there too. So yeah, that's been nice. And we love nature.
That's great.
I led 25 trips west with college students. Wow. Long trips, not talking about like 6 week long, summer and winter trips. 6 weeks in the summer, 3 weeks in the winter. 25. And that was by far the best quality teaching and experience that we had. You couldn't go wrong because you're going to places. We got to Blunt. We got in Yellowstone and all these beautiful, wonderful places, the Indian Reservation. Whatever was interesting, that's where we went.
Sure. And what I find...
And we camped.
What I find particularly interesting is how you synthesize your love of poetry and love of nature and put them together in very unique poems, such as the one we were talking about before, Manhattan and Idaho, and how you shape them to match the landscape or in a way, pay homage to the landscape. Can you speak to those poems and how you were inspired to do this?
Yeah. It's something that, again, has the physical shape of poems has always mattered, and I always did pay attention to them. I have a whole set of river poems, which are shaped like rivers. Eventually they'll probably end up being all in a book. When I say shaped like rivers, kind of like this is one, and this is another one, and there's about a dozen altogether. And some are specific to specific places, like the mouth of the Hudson River or Redwood Creek in California. And some, like these two, are general. If you want to read, they're short.
That would be great. Absolutely.
So these, I mean, they're shaped like rivers, but it doesn't matter when I read them. Yeah. It's just the words themselves. This one's called River. Drop by drop, snowmelt seeps from a grotto, a meadow, a dripping rock. From the bellies of mountains, 1,000 fingers reach for the sea. We come together roaring drunk. On the surface, laughter and joy. Foam that leaps in the sun so brilliant, you cannot see the deeper currents, rolling stones along the bed. Coho salmon tickle my gut while driving upstream under the influence of intoxicating liquor. I rise with each blow to uproot willows from the bank and swallow islands in the storm. My mood changes with the weather, darkens with the sky. When really loaded, I feel like the serpent rampaging through paradise. That's the voice of the river and the poem. There's another one that follows it, called The Lure of the River. This is a little more human side of things. We're drawn to the surge and eddy, to standing waves that loom and splash, holes so deep our hearts drop to our stomachs on the way down. Brown's Hole roars over a jagged ledge. Paddle carefully through the yawning wet roller coaster at Martin Rapids. An unnamed chute near Fin Rock tossed us for a cold swim, and a belly laugh later by the fire. Beware the thrill of riding waves drunk with the scent of fishy spray, bobbing along like a colorful feather. If we get too high or lose respect for a moment, enchanted by million facets of dancing sunlight, we may drown in raging sound, hooked like a trout on a well-cast fly. So there's some river poems, and there's a whole bunch of them that are like that. And so that's my poems. They're really more than most poems now. They tend to be kind of nature. They deal with nature issues. Sometimes they've had to do with broad politics. There's one about herbicide that doesn't sound like a very poetic subject, but I did actually end up doing a poem with them. But the shape has always mattered. I've always been attentive. When I was much younger, I admired what they call the concrete poets that spread their words on a page, E. Cummings and people like that. Although because I'm a geographer, I ended up evolving to a kind of a stricter form of shape in which I try to really reflect the actual places as best as I can. So that's how that has worked. Again, I have had some moments of successful publication, though usually it's by chance because I'm not a good submitter. But for example, the New York Times, it happened that one of the people that worked there saw a version of it and liked it and said, we should really do this. And she was one of the editors that I don't know if you met Janet Maslin, theater critic. She saw it and she went over to the other people in the outfit and says, look at this. And so I said, okay. So, but that's kind of how my stuff gets out in odd ways because I've been kind of a Semitophobic, so to speak. That's not an existing word, but it's a word that kind of describes my sense of that. Sure. So I'm trying to overcome that.
Yeah.
I'm going out to Oregon in October to go to a poets and writers gathering, which I haven't done in a long, long time, and hope to get integrated with other poets and writers there, and maybe even submit more.
A lot of your poems, like you said, are about rivers, and you have a collection of river poems. Oh, yeah. What are some rivers that have mattered to you and what had really affected you?
Well, the river that we lived on, that was the subject of, to some extent, those two poems are kind of universal that I read, was in Oregon, the Mackenzie River. The Hudson River is a poem that I've been working on, and that I've completed as a separate item, the mouth from the river, actually where it goes into the ocean. And kind of interesting topic, but it's a topic that is a subject of poem. Also, the headwaters up in Mount Marcy and the Adirondacks, poem that starts up there and ends up with a connection to history because Teddy Roosevelt came down out of there from Mount Marcy when McKinley was shot and hurried on down to assume the role of office. So those are kinds of poems. Some poems are playful. I have a lifetime of mostly unpublished stuff. Though there have been some. There have been here and there obscure poems that did get published places. Some are academic. I did some poems that are playful about school and academics. For example, this is one that was actually published in a place out in California called 13 Ways of Looking at a Grade. A grade stood on a high rock and crowed, "I am the universe." The student chose the left path on the road. The grade came sauntering down the right path 4 weeks later. The student put a fat grade on a hook, threw it into the lake, hoping to catch a big fish. The teacher talked to a nearly empty room. When the students asked for a grade, she raised her eyes and looked at the moon. A personnel manager piles a desk full of grades on top of each other, building a house of grades. The chicken sat on a grade for 3 months, but nothing hatched. A farmer enters the coop and collects them. Grade A sells for 96 cents a dozen. The student walked along the beach, gazed at a cloud, quietly watched a bird, and stubbed his toe on the grade. One morning, the ugly grade looked into a pond and saw it was a beautiful swan. 96 grades were planted on a hillside. The planter never returned to see how they grew. The grades were deposited offshore years ago. They're preserved today in libraries of stone. She looked at her grade, put it in her pocket, continued to walk up the mountain. The grade is steep, but once we cross the divide, it's downhill all the way. That's 13 ways to look at
There we go.
but, a playful academic.
Sure. And can you speak about your time as a professor? How did that affect you?
Well, again, I was not a poetry professor. I was a geography professor. So I never taught. I occasionally came as a guest to some poetry classes, but my work was geography, and I loved it. As I said, I took students out to the West and out in the field, not only in the West, but local too. We go out to camp in the forests and do camp in Wawayanda and Finger Lakes and other places. So field work is the best. When I retired, partly it was because the pandemic started. I was old enough that might have gone on for a couple more years. I was about 73 when I did, but basically the pandemic wasn't good for my teaching. I'm not an online type of teacher. I like to see people and go places and do things with them. And the online world that happened when everything, I did it for the rest of the term, but it wasn't very much fun. So it was time to bag it.
You see, and that is a challenge, adapting to new things like that, especially during a pandemic, which is a once in a lifetime occurrence. What are some other challenges that you've had to go through in life, and how did you come out on the other side?
Well, challenges in life. I've been very lucky to have a great partner that we've been together for 50 some odd years. And our children are always a challenge. We have two, and they're challenging in different ways. So I'm proud, loving and proud of them. My daughter lives in Las Vegas. We'll be visiting her. She's been there for like 25 years. And my son is a photographer in Burlington, Vermont. And he's doing quite well as a photographer. My daughter's struggling a lot in Las Vegas, partly because of a series of situations that are complex, but hopefully to make her way through obstacles.
Now, what are some things that bring you joy?
A lot of things bring me joy, but among them is I like comedy. I like funny movies and things that are fun to do. I love, again, nature. Beauty in nature is joyous. Sweets. I like all kinds of stuff like that. It's been a lot of adventures, a lot of joy. We were lucky to join the workers' own co-op because we really got a great sense of community. That's something that we're really lucky to have, because a lot of people don't ever get that. The work doesn't top down and regimented. I was, even when I was a college teacher, I had the freedom to basically do it. There wasn't Big Brother wasn't looking over me, so that was good.
That's great. So community, for sure. Community is something that brings joy. Can you explain to me more about this co-op situation?
Yeah. What happened was tree planting. In those days, it was more. There's always been some tree planting. It isn't Johnny Appleseed. No, we're making a living, and we're basically reforesting clear cuts. For the most part, we're planting trees, areas of the lumber industry is logged over, and that's so we get trees back in. And the expectation is that they themselves will be cut in about 80 or 100 years when they're big enough. Who knows what will happen in 80 or 100 years? But it was an industry. It was a field that you're out in nature. You're camped out there, and some people. I wasn't one of the founders of this, but some visionary young planters realized that we could form co-ops and bid our own jobs. And if we won the jobs, we could do them, and we didn't have to be a part of the team where there's a boss. and that ended up happening. It's called the Hodads, and it ended up lasting. We were there for about 10 years. It lasted more than that, 25 years. And the old Hodads are still, we're in our 70s, 60s to 70s now, but we're still, those that are still around, still are close. And we'll probably have a reunion sometime in the near future.
Sounds like your life is filled with adventures, with new things, and you're going around. What are some adventures that you've been on in life? You write a lot about rivers and about nature, and you're out in the forests in Oregon. Where?
Oh yeah,
yeah. What are some of the adventures that stick out to you?
Oh God, there's a lot. There's many different kinds of adventures from different periods of life. Many different periods. Something that comes to mind, which you may or may not want to focus on, because it's not something that normally people would like to talk about. But what the heck? I lived through the '60s.
Sure.
and I did all the things that young men did in the '60s. Fought against the Vietnam War right from the beginning. Would never have gone there. As it worked out, if need be, I would have ended up going to prison or Canada. But as it is, they concluded I wasn't mentally fit to be in the military, which is kind of embarrassing, but maybe that was true. Anyway, so that was a period of great conflict and instability in our country, and I was a part of that, marching against the war and those things. I had a few trips to Europe in the '60s. Mostly since that time, I've been in this country, going out west, but in the '60s, I did a few European trips on my own, and one of them in '68, when I was about 21, and ended up with a lot of adventures, including one in which I unexpectedly found myself at the base of the Parthenon in Greece at about 4:30 in the morning with some people I didn't know very well. They were from Harvard that we'd met, and they had gotten them. They were drinking in a bar. I didn't go into the bar, but they were ripped off at the bar, and they lost all their money and everything. They decided, well, let's go up to the Acropolis. It was right below it. So we went up there right around sunrise, and they whipped out LSD, right, unexpectedly. So I ended up taking some, and we had this incredible sunrise on this Parthenon, fallen columns. And back in those days, there was nobody there. There's not a guard or anything. Not that it would have been. The inside was locked, but the outside was all wide open. We had nothing. We were just there by ourselves. So I remember sitting there, looking at this incredibly beautiful sunrise, sitting on these ancient fallen columns of the Parthenon. I think, oh my God, what can like the sky was like an El Greco painting. Really, in fact, there was a big storm later that day. So that was pretty an exciting moment. Wow. But there were lots, and we're still having exciting moments.
Wow. Like Apollo rising, right?
That was it. Again, it was chance. It was lucky, unexpected chance, but that is something that happened. And more recent adventures. Well, as I'm older, they're not quite as on the edge as they once were. But I still love beauty of place. I've liked visiting hot springs a lot. When we did a lot of soaking and swimming in the West, and that took students to a lot of different places to swim, including many hot springs. That was always a great pleasure.
Now, how would you describe your outlook on life?
Well, enjoy the days as they come. Do the best we can. I'm prone to getting bummed out by politics and the news, but I nonetheless do feel like I need to stay engaged in those things. Though it's been hard, I would have to say that the world was a more, despite the Vietnam War and all those things, there was a more fundamental optimism when I was in the 1970s and while I was in my 20s and 30s compared to today. I think it's harder today. I sympathize for young people today because between climate change and the politics and the right-wing Supreme Court and everything, it's kind of tougher situation. But we make the best we can of it.
Sure. And how do you see the future?
I'm not sure what you mean by how do I see it. We take it day by day. I hope that we make better choices. There's been progress in many areas and backsliding in others. I don't know. For our own future, we try to, in our own small way, fight for the things that we believe in. I did fight against the misuse of herbicides here in this area. Greenwood Lake, which is a big lake here, is also drinking water for 3 million people, and they were spraying herbicides into it to kill unwanted weeds. And I organized a big battle to fight that, and we were successful. We did stop it. However, as is often the case with these things, it was a huge effort, and there was a lot of work involved. I have documents that were put out that I thought I had, but maybe not. If not, it doesn't matter. But anyway, we had a lot of meetings and actions about it, and I put out 2 30-page pamphlets about why they shouldn't do it. And that caused a lot of uproar, but it was successful. They halted the treatment. However, as often the case with environmental battles, success is temporary, not forever. We repeated the success about 10 years later, but then 10 years after that, they did it. And I was at that point too burnt out. I wasn't able to do another 1,000-hour investment in time. Not that it would have mattered, because the politics had gone sour for that. The younger people were there that believed in chemicals and thought, "Oh, great, I'll kill the weeds." So they're spraying again. So it was a victory that lasted about 20 years. Likewise, they ended up rising and fighting artificial turf. They wanted to put in the football fields because there's a lot of bad things about artificial turf. Has a lot of PFAs, forever chemicals. It's made out of recycled tires and plastic blades of grass. It's basically toxic stuff. Great for big oil companies and corporations because they can recycle tires, use a lot of plastic. But it's nasty stuff, and it's also adversely affects the ecosystem under it, and also the players that play on it that can get hurt more easily than compared to natural grass. So we and it also costs like $5 million. Yeah, huge cost of it. So we fought it, and again, I didn't do that alone, but I was part of it. People like spontaneously got together, and we were successful. They backed down when they stated the case and explained the reasons and everything.
And was that local?
Yeah, that was right here in Warwick. Warwick. My experience with big environmental battles, which I've been engaged in a bunch of years, is that you can win a lot of them. To use a baseball analogy, I probably batted around 500 on big environmental battles. Maybe won half and lost half, which is pretty good for baseball. Sure, it isn't baseball, but basically, I feel like I know how to do that and help people do it. And again, that was what I was hired to do. My poetry is central to my life, but it's an aside in terms of profession. I wasn't never hired to be a poet. Never been paid to be a poet. And poetry is also something I do on my own, but it isn't in a sense, the environmental work and the teaching is the actual life.
And we're talking a little bit about the future. How does the future look for you when it comes to producing your work and continuing your love of poetry?
Good question. That's, I don't know the answer. I'm trying. In the last 2 years, I've tried to reach out and join the world of poets after about 20 years of being distracted by other things, not doing what you're teaching, and leading field trips all summer. It's hard to be a scholar in a more conventional way. Plus, the scholarship wasn't always poetry. But now it is. I'm becoming aware that, I'll be 75 in a month or two. So my time ability to finish this is limited. I can't put it off 10 more years. I've got to do it pretty much now. And so that's become a priority. That's why this book is called Blue River Poems. And I mentioned that there a lot of the poems were written back in the 80s and 70s, some more recently, but hardly any of them ever got published. So now I'm going to try to do it as best as I can.
Now,
I'm going out to Oregon in October to take part in that.
Now, do you notice any differences between the poems that you wrote back then in the 70s and the 80s and the poems that you write now? Is there anything that stands out to you that's different?
There a lot of them are not very different. But each one is unique. Each one has its own poem. But the basic idea of that it's typically triggered by some kind of inspiration, an image, and then grows like a seed, grows around it. And revise was true back in the 1960s when I was doing early poems, and still true now. Some of the poems that I think are the best, the poems that I wrote, that I've never published, were begun 50 years ago, and I've still been revising them like 1 year ago. So literally 50 years. If you want, there's two of them that are extremely much in that way. And I could read them. They don't take that long to read.
Sure, that'd be great.
They're different, but yeah, and I would be happy to
absolutely
to read them. This one is called Stump, and it's part of that emotional. I wrote it when I was on the river, living on the Mackenzie River in this beautiful place that later burned, though it was not burned then. And it's a poem about a stump from the point of view of that stump, much like the river was from the point of view of the river. Stump. Roots still hold 10 feet of earth around which the universe spins. The river, most hungry when it's full, cannot swallow the place where I was born. 1,000 snows nursed me. Soaking mists kept my needles green. An osprey nested on a broken branch for 10 years, looking out over the water for rainbows to spear. My trunk was scorched by a blaze that swept down the valley on an east wind. The river saved me that time, but not even my oldest friend, Orion, who never fails to return after a storm, and is so great his belt studs are 1 billion miles apart, could save me on that wet morning 35 years ago. After a terrible month of wheels and groans, when my brothers and sisters were hauled off by horses, I felt the big saw bite through my heart, and I fell into the river like a stone. That's Stump.
Yeah.
And I visualize that as being, again, a visual poem, and maybe with an artist to have an actual image of it with Stump. I love working with an artist on this book. I can see that would be well with it, finding a good artist to cooperate. But we'll see how that happens. If not, it may stand by itself that way.
Now, with that poem in particular, you're writing from the perspective of the stump itself.
Mm-hmm.
But are you utilizing any of your own feelings, any of your own experiences, and using them to personify the stump?
Maybe. No, it's a story of the stump. The stump has it's being anthropomorphized, so to speak. It's observing the rainbow trout in the water and things like that. And these areas were heavily logged. We have a lot of high stumps that were cut in that way. So it's kind of the story from the stump's point of view.
Yeah.
This is another one that I began 50 years ago. And unlike Stump, which actually started and finished many years ago, I never published it, but it was written way back then. This poem was started back then and has been revised multiple times. And it's a more difficult poem in some ways. And it's a Pacific Northwest poem in particular. But it's called Endangered Species. 99 poems are cut down for every one preserved. And 99 trees were cut for books they're printed in. Only the privileged few ever look at the poem or the tree. The bottom line, industry finds little profit here, seeks greater return by converting to mass production. In seldom walked woods past the edge of the field, big ones are marked for sale. They take down the giants, idiosyncratic, moss-burrowed monarchs, and hire us, planters of trees, planters of words, to refill the shelves with tightly spaced rows of uniform stock, pulp for the marketplace. If we don't protect ancient groves still living in remote corners of old libraries, what would become of the poets in residence? Those rare birds rumored to hoot and holler far into the night. Working the front lines shows me the reason for going out on a limb to save that endangered species, hidden within canopies of words, found only in decadent stanzas. The spotted vowel. So that's the endangered species.
And
Spotted vowel.
those are great. Those are fantastic. I've really resonated with them. I enjoy them a lot. I have deep down, I have a deep love of nature as well. So I really appreciate this kind of work. And what I do pick up on too is they sound very in the same style as poets. It's like Gary Snyder.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Who are some of your, would you say, your influences when it comes
Gary Snyder, definitely.
Sure.
And I actually did meet him a few times over the years.
Oh, wow.
And liked him. Although we never really had an opportunity to get close, but we did actually correspond. He liked this book.
Oh, yeah?
I sent him that book and he liked it.
Now, what are some of the experiences that you had with him?
At various events, some of it involved herbicide stuff. He also fought. There's a book. I went upstairs and get it. A book called "Working the Woods, Working the Sea," which is a really wonderful book that was published in the state of Washington around the year 2006, and it had some 6 of my poems in it, along many. It's a big book, many poems about, and not just poems, but also short stories, and half is about the forests and half is about fishing and salmon fishing in the oceans. It's a wonderful book, but Gary Snyder has stuff in it, and so we encountered each other some during that time. Barry Lopez is another well-known writer that I was close friends with, basically because we lived near each other on the river. We lived 2 miles apart all those years in the 70s and 80s. So Barry's, as you know, he's a wonderful writer too. I'm sure Arctic Dreams and Wolves and Men are a whole bunch of nice stuff. So I admire, and also Barry is very, very, he was very disciplined. Unlike me, I was never been very disciplined. Barry really got up, made sure he put 4 hours at writing every morning. Very disciplined in that way.
What does your routine look like?
lazy,
Oh yeah.
pretty darn lazy. That's why although it adds up to a lot of poems, not as many as it could have been. There were a lot of things that and there's still a lot of fragments that I started and didn't finish, and probably most of them will never be finished. But a few still might be. There's still some things that I see in there. I think that can be finished. There's a poem about this, the watershed we're in right now, while we're on the creek, that is mostly finished, but not all the way, and that will be finished. Trying to get this book out is a spur to finish those loose ends, and that hopefully will happen in the next few months.
We all work at our own pace too, and that's completely valid. Some people produce, like Jack Kerouac is writing like consistently and gets on the road out in a brief period of time, and some of us take an extended period of time to produce a work, whether that be multiple or a single piece of work. But I'm taking a look out here right now in your garden, and I don't see laziness. I'll tell you that much. That's the hand. Oh, okay.
It's the early 1950s at the American Museum of Natural History. The little boy's excitement grows as Daddy holds his hand, walking up the marble steps. The Allosaurus, the Stegosaurus, the big Brontosaurus. My imagination was transported to the Gobi Desert by dinosaur eggs. My terror was delighted by an oncoming asteroid impact in Arizona at the planetarium. When we were 12, Jimmy and I, specimens in hand, came to visit the curator of the butterfly collection. Wandering past dugout canoes and the hanging blue whale, I would always return to the grand dioramas. Northern lights dance above the Yukon snow. Great herds of zebra and wildebeest migrate across vast Serengeti distance. The Grand Canyon glows at sunset, a wary rattlesnake coiled near the cliff. Porcupines chew bark in a wooded glade as light filters through green leaves. Meticulously painted by master craftsmen from sketches drawn on location, the edge of a cliff in the face of an oncoming storm, or perspiring in the heat of a Bengal bamboo grove, and carefully populated with specimens of fine taxidermy. The dioramas were magic stages for nature in the halls of Africa, Asia, and North America. These great illusions showed this boy the wonder of the real wild world. So that's dinosaur noise.
Now, did much of your work is based on the love of nature?
Yeah.
You're from New York City. Where is it moments like this where this love of nature you believe is cultivated?
I think so. I think, the museum was a great place for that. There's such, you've been to those
Oh, sure.
Dioramas. They just, they get you excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when I was growing up, when I lived in the city, I was into nature in a big way. I remember on one occasion I was playing right field in a baseball game, and I got distracted by a big butterfly out in right field, and it became a kind of an issue because the batter hit a ball in my direction. I was distracted by the butterfly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always into nature. I liked sport. I was never particularly great at sports, but sure, good enough to be on the teams, though. I was never a star on the team.
So nature found its way through the cracks, through the urban cracks. It came through and
Exactly.
touched you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. And always did. That has always it has always been there. Here's a couple other poems that are different in their mood. This is one that is have a fun poem to read, called "One Evening at Eagle Rock." Eagle Rock is where we lived, and we had anyway. Here's the story. One evening at Eagle Rock,
Claudia enjoyed fly fishing on her bend of the river and was proud that Herbert Hoover once fished in her hole. She would sit on her porch and gaze at the neck-stretching view. To the east, rapids, dancing currents and waves. To the sky, Eagle Rock, far above old-growth fir. To the west, sunlit river sweeping downstream. Anne and I rented a cabin from her, grew a garden, and thrived. One evening, Claudia was on the porch, drinking, and singing to her favorite hummingbird, when her mood turned sour. "Cutie pie, you shit-ass." Trouble started when two fishermen trespassed on her favorite hole. She hollered to no response, went for a rifle, and warned she would fire at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The shot rang out, and the men kept fishing. Her drunken voice sang out, "This one will be a little bit closer. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Still no response. "This one will be right behind your ears. 1, 2, 3. Boom." The men came back along the riverbank, yelled, "Got the limit," and walked out to the road. 2 hours later, police knocked on the door. "We heard there was shooting. Tell us about it." I told them nothing, and suggested they ask the house next door. The following afternoon, as Claudia was on the porch, enjoying the view, I asked what happened when the cops came by. She laughed and said, "I told them I was just shooting at a couple of blue jays." So that's one evening at Eagle Rock.
Wow. Can you tell me a little bit about Anne and her role in your life?
Well, yeah, we planted trees together. We raised children together. We've been really good partners for a long, long time. Yeah, so we're still good partners. Yeah, been together for some 50 some odd years. That's been good. So now we're as society evolved, so did we. And I think we in the 60s and 70s, when times were a little bit looser, we were a little bit looser too. I think we weren't maybe as monogamous as the expectations of normalcy today. But we got through that, and we stayed close. And then over the years after we had children, we settled into more comfortable kind of monogamous situation. But we've always been best friends.
Huh.
That's great. I'm really lucky to have had a good partner, and she's a great gardener. They'll come from different backgrounds and traditions, though neither of us necessarily follow the religious and cultural traditions that we were born with. I was born in a Jewish family, so not particularly religious, and Anne was born in a Protestant family, also not particularly religious. So we don't go to religious services in any church or synagogue, but we have a kind of nature. It's a good place to worship, so to speak, and so we share that. We both love nature and love other things. Had dogs and cats for a long time. At the moment, we don't, but we did until not long ago. But the last dog passed away at the age of about 17 and a half, and we're not prepared to start over at this point. We'll see.
Do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
Yeah. Again, not necessarily organized religion, but yeah, I too. I am a son, and so is she.
You find that in nature?
In nature, yeah. And we have she occasionally takes part in some some ceremonies with Quakers. So and people, although we're not regular attendees of that stuff, but yeah, I think we treat ourselves as spiritual insofar as that life is sacred and the earth is sacred.
Just a side note: have you been to here in Warwick I believe it's a Christian Zen temple.
You're thinking of Pachamattaran.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I've read there, and I'm friends with the people that built it. They're not alive anymore, but I was still friends with Lucas Frank, Frederick Frank, and Koska built it. Have you been there?
I've been there. It's a very interesting. Yeah, and it is very beautiful. It's a very interesting synchronicity between Zen Christianity and nature spirituality. I feel it's very unique, and it very clearly is a testimony to the person who built it in many ways, but it's also, something much bigger than that. Yeah, very, very inspired by it.
Oh, and rightfully so. Yeah, they just had a concert a week ago, a wonderful concert. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, perhaps, I don't know, it wasn't as full. Usually they completely fill up, which is only 80 people.
Yeah.
But this time there's maybe only 50 or 60. But the performers came all the way from the city with a big organ and a huge bass, which are huge instruments to be brought down there. I know they wanted Bach. They played mostly Bach. They also had a music about Hiroshima. Oh, and there's also a Jewish prayer. But it was primarily Bach in that. It was great. Yeah, so yeah, and I love the place, and used to help maintain the garden there, but she hasn't. So she gardened for clients for many years, but she's retired from that now. Pacham wasn't planned; it was just a volunteer, to go there and do stuff. They had a circular garden which is kind of a little bit abandoned right now, although it's still a dynamic and wonderful place. Yeah, you.
What would you like the world to know about you?
It's a funny thing. I don't think the world knows or remembers very much about anything, really. No, fame is elusive and probably not worth it. When Manhattan came out and the potential for fame was there, perhaps I muffed it. I never followed up with things. I made a poster 9 years later, when it should have been, 9 weeks later. But that's, I nonetheless, I do feel proud of the finished work, which like Manhattan and the Oregon Coast is another poster, and hope to finish this other book of poems to whatever readership it may have. It may be 10 people or 100 people, probably not thousands, but that's okay. My sense of things that we're here. Ultimately, we get recycled into other myriad beings and make the most of it.
Oh, I'll definitely be one of those people that reads your book. I'm very excited for it. And your work is tremendous. As someone who is very attached to nature and really on a spiritual level, I resonate with your work, and it touches me. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. No one has ever, come to interview that stuff. Again, as a poet, although it's a central part of my life, it's been kind of an obscure part, because my main job was a geography professor. I leading field trips. Before that, it was planting trees and try to for sound forestry. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
There were brief. I did get some brief coverage here and there over the years. When the book came out, the tree planting book, there was nice coverage locally, and there was some very nice articles, which felt good. You know, that stuff passes. You know, it's literally those things, they're nice, but they're not really what matters. So what really matters, you know, we've been real lucky. I was in great fortune to have a partner, and we've been, you know, healthy enough throughout our lives. She's recovered from breast cancer, but she's recovering. And I can't complain. We're the luckiest, some very lucky people.
Living life. Well, Howie,
I worry about the direction of the world and the nation, but there's not much we can do other than our little bit to hopefully these may get better.
we all play our part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.